October. The month of ghosts, pumpkins, and everything spooky. And while most people were watching horror movies and carving jack-o'-lanterns, a real-life horror story was unfolding in Florida, involving blood rituals, graveyards, and a self-proclaimed vampire lord named Rod Ferrell. He wasn't your typical teen rebel. He believed, truly believed, that he was a 500-year-old vampire named Visago, and the small town of Eustis, Florida, would soon learn what that kind of delusion looks like when it turns deadly. This wasn't some creepy urban legend or campfire story either. This was real life, and by the end of it, 2 people would be dead, and an entire town would be left asking how a teenager could fall this far into fantasy. Rod Ferrell was born in Murray, Kentucky in 1980, to 2 teenage parents who had no clue how to raise a child. His father left to join the military, and his mother, Sandra Gibson, worked as an exotic dancer and occasional sex worker. Sandra dabbled in the occult from a young age. She called herself a vampire, and later on she even tried to cross over with a 14-year-old boy. Yes, as in drink blood and seal the ritual. She was arrested for that, which gives you a good idea of how warped Rod's environment was. With no stability, no guidance, and a mother who treated fantasy like faith, Rod grew up in a world where reality bent around his imagination. By the time he was a teen, he wasn't pretending to be a vampire anymore. He was living as one. Rod's mother often moved between Kentucky and Florida. During one of these stints in Eustis, a quiet lakeside town near Orlando, Rod met Heather Wendorf, a teenage girl from a well-off but strict family. Heather was rebellious, the kind who loved to push boundaries, and she found Rod fascinating. They bonded quickly over their shared love for gothic culture, dark imagery, and everything anti-normal. He was mysterious, confident, and offered her an escape from her parents' rules. When Sandra broke up with her boyfriend, she and Rod moved back to Kentucky, separating the pair. But Heather and Rod stayed in touch through letters and long, expensive phone calls, and each message made their fantasy world feel more real, more intoxicating, more dangerous. Back in Kentucky, Rod built himself a following, a small group of misfits who called themselves the Vampire Clan. There was Scott Anderson, his best friend and right-hand man, Charity Kessie, his girlfriend, and Dana Cooper, an older friend who let them use her apartment for parties and rituals. They weren't just role-playing. They believed they had supernatural powers. They dressed in black, cut their arms, and drank each other's blood mixed with water, claiming it connected them forever. Their vampire hotel, a rundown building deep in the woods, became their hideout. But what started as gothic escapism quickly turned into cruelty. Rod's group began vandalizing property, mutilating animals, and hanging out in graveyards. Locals whispered about satanic rituals. The sheriff just called them troubled kids, but the warning signs were already there. By late 1996, Heather was claiming her parents were abusive. She told Rod that her home life was a nightmare, that she was trapped and desperate to escape. Whether that was true or not, Rod saw himself as her savior. So, he and his clan, Scott, Charity, and Donna, piled into Scott's car and began the 800-mile drive to Florida. Their mission was clear: rescue Heather and take her to New Orleans, the city Rod called the home of real vampires. When they arrived, Heather met them in Greenwood Cemetery, the local haunted graveyard. There she took part in a blood ritual, officially crossing over into Rod's clan. But what was meant to be a fantasy escape would soon become a real-life horror. Rod and Scott decided they needed a car for the trip to New Orleans, and the only car that made sense was Heather's parents. On November 25th, 1996, they sneaked into the Wendorf home through the unlocked garage. Inside, Rod found a crowbar. He spotted Heather's father, Richard Wendorf, asleep on the couch, and in seconds turned fantasy into murder. he beat Richard to death, fracturing his skull and ribs. When Heather's mother Naomi came out of the shower, Rod killed her too after she threw coffee at him. He claimed later he didn't mean to, but the evidence told a different story. The word vampire wasn't just a label anymore. It had become an excuse for pure violence. The group robbed the house, danced around the bodies, and sped off into the night, convinced they were untouchable. After the murders, the clan hit the road. 5 teenagers in a stolen Ford Explorer driving across states with almost no money. They bragged about what they'd done, even though not everyone understood the full truth. Eventually, Charity called her grandmother in South Dakota asking for money. Her grandmother, alarmed, called the police. Within hours, authorities tracked the group to a motel in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. 4 days after the killings, police surrounded the motel and arrested all 5. Rod didn't fight. He smiled for cameras, claiming psychic powers and blaming rival vampire clans. But the evidence was clear. Fingerprints, shoe prints, and blood traces. The vampire lord was just a delusional teen with a crowbar.
Probably be around 6 or 7.
Is it actually possible for someone my age to get like a death penalty?
It depends. I don't know what the laws are in Florida. When you're 16 years old in this state, you can be tried as an adult, and you're subject to adult penalties.
That's what I was thinking when I've done it. If I was an adult, maybe a death penalty.
Sure.
So I was kind of hoping, I was like, please, go ahead.
Probably going to entail the death penalty.
I'm sorry, this is just like a big fucking joke. My whole life seems like a dream, so... My childhood was taken away at 5. I don't know whether I'm asleep or dreaming anymore, so... whatever. Well, I know I can wake up in 5 minutes.
I can assure you it's not a dream.
So it felt pretty good.
Anything else you want to add?
Got a question for y'all.
Go ahead.
You seriously think I'm fucked?
Hard to tell. We can't guess the system.
Rod was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. His defense claimed insanity, pointing to his warped childhood and his mother's influence. But the court wasn't moved. In 1998, he was sentenced to death, the youngest person on death row in America at the time. The judge called him a disturbed young man who had been failed by his family and society, but still responsible for his choices.
It's not so hard for some of us to understand how a person like Rod Ferrell, with one of the most dysfunctional family environments anyone could ever be cursed to be raised in, would have turned out in such a manner. In some respects, I think Mr. Farrell's mother, Mrs. Gibson, should be on trial for some of this. At every stage of the way, she thwarted every attempt to find Mr. Farrell the psychological help that he needed. Purposefully, advertently, she kept him from receiving the help that he so desperately required. Rod, I say to you, I think you're a disturbed young man. I think your family failed you. I think society failed you.
Years later, his sentence was reduced to life without parole, while his clan members received lesser terms. Heather was released entirely, though many still believe she knew more than she ever admitted. Today, Rod Ferrell remains behind bars, still calling himself a vampire. And if there's one lesson here, it's this. Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't born from horror movies. They're created at home.